Hi, everyone, and welcome to Fearless Female Entrepreneurs, where you will receive expert advice and inspiration from 18 fierce feminine leaders and entrepreneurial experts who want to help you supercharge your power as a feminine thought leader and initiate your own powerful rising. I'm your host, Jocelyn Mercado, and today I am so excited to welcome Simone Wright. Thank you, Simone, so much for being a part of this event.
Hi, Jocelyn. Good to be back.
Yeah, so good to have you here. So let me just share your bio with everybody who may not already be familiar with your work. Simone Wright is an internationally respected authority on mysticism, intuition, and evolutionary creativity. Steeped in a lifetime of mystical experience and inquiry, Simone brings a clear, down-to-earth, and often humorous perspective to the concepts of consciousness, spiritual evolution, and transformation. With the intention of knocking the fluff off of many of the concepts of the New Age, Simone grounds her teaching in ancient mystical concepts and philosophies to bring greater peace, power, and potency to our spiritual adventure. She has put these principles to work in her own life to heal her body from a life-threatening disorder, to shape her businesses, and to become the highest-selling artist of her kind in the world. She has used her skills to assist law enforcement in missing children's cases and others, has trained and taught people from all walks of life how to tap into their intuitive power, and has coached people from around the world on how to step into their authentic spiritual power and begin to walk the path of the modern mystic with greater strength, courage, and mastery. Simone is also an inspired entrepreneur who runs 3 businesses and recently began a partnership with NASA and the Hubble Telescope Science Team to launch an international art show in Los Angeles in 2020. Her website is www.simonewright.com, and her new podcast is called Modern Mystics with Simone Wright and can be found on iTunes and Podbean. And Simone, you just amaze me with all that you are doing, all of these incredible projects that you're working on, as I was mentioning to you before the interview. So yeah, really wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I love your topic for today, which is called Visioneering, Shaping Your Future from the Inside Out. So let's dive in. And I would love to ask you just to start out, because this is something we were chatting about right before the interview began. Could you just share a little bit about what is an entrepreneur?
Sure. I think having a clear understanding of what an entrepreneur is really important for everybody on the summit. To be an entrepreneur, and I mean, the origins of the word are pretty ancient. Entre means to reach out, to stretch out. Literally, it means to swim out. And preneur means to know, to understand, to gather information. And then there's a deeper, sort of more mystical understanding of it, that it means to be a self-starter. It means to be self-governed. It means to be self-directed. So to be an entrepreneur means to be a change maker, means to be somebody who wants to do something differently or do something new. It doesn't necessarily mean to be somebody who is self-employed, although that is certainly an aspect of it. But you can be an entrepreneur in your own business if that's what you feel inspired and directed and you feel capable of doing, to be sort of flying by the seat of your pants with no safety net. Some people are wired for that. They can handle that degree of uncertainty and that degree of stress, and other people can't. And so it's important to know, I can still be an entrepreneur and have this visionary nature and have this desire to create change and have this desire to do things that are different and have this desire to bring new things to the world because I know it needs to change. But I can do that and not have to step out of the job that I've had for 20 years, unless I really want to. Mm-hmm. And so I want you guys to really know that the nature of an entrepreneur is to be a change maker, is to have an idea for yourself, that's self-direction, and find ways to implement it, whether it's in your job, your business, your small business, or where you're at now. Because there's a lot of people who own small businesses who I wouldn't necessarily call an entrepreneur. They're not cultivating change. They're not really doing anything differently. They're not catalyzing a new paradigm. They're just small business people. But there are lots of entrepreneurs who are in already established businesses who are creating new paradigms in existing business culture. And those are mystical entrepreneurs. And we need those people in existing businesses to switch the paradigm. So I invite you guys to consider what an entrepreneur really is and how then you can plug that into where you are now. And if you want to take the big leap and start your own business, then, and you're wired to do that, then you understand what to be an entrepreneur really is. And that lightens the load for people who want to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that. I think everything you shared there is really, really key.
Yeah.
So getting into your topic of visioneering, can you share with us to start out, how did you develop the visioneering process?
Well, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 9. I started my very first business when I was 9 years old. And um, and the reason that I'm an entrepreneur in sort of the typical way where I'm self-employed and I have my own businesses and I don't work for other people is because, and Jocelyn and I were talking about this before, is I'm a bit of a control freak. I don't like to be told what to do. I find structure really boring and limiting. And so at the age of 9, I decided that I wanted to sell little styrofoam caterpillars made with pipe cleaner. And so I took my allowance money and I went to the craft store and I made these little styrofoam caterpillars, and then I sold them door to door in my neighborhood for $2 a piece. And I told people how this caterpillar would change their life and make their bathroom or their kitchen just so much better. So, at an early age, I was being creative. I was being a self-starter. I was in the dining room with my mom, wiring and gluing little eyes on the caterpillars, keeping, bank accounts and noticing things like that. And that sort of continued. It continued into my art. It continued into my project with NASA. It continued into my coaching, my teaching, my writing. And what I noticed, and for those of you guys who've heard me before, and I've been on the summits with Jocelyn before, I talk a lot about the mystical processes, the creative processes that come from, not the physical world. And there was always sort of an intuitive guidance that said, hey, let's do this. Hey, let's try this. Hey, let's let go of what no longer works and move into something new. And those processes, when I sort of reverse engineered them, I said, well, how did I do it when I was 9? And what did I do when I started my art business that made me this highest selling artist? And what am I doing in this project with NASA? And there was a commonality to all of these processes. And I do that with everything I do. With intuition, I reverse engineer it. With the mystical processes, I reverse engineered it. With my healing process, I reverse engineered it. How did I do it? And you start at the end. You start at the end to find your way to the beginning. And so visioneering is the mystical creative process of starting at the end, starting at your target, and allowing your intuitive and creative mind to fill in the gap from where you are now to where you want to be. And if you give your mind a strong target, the intuitive visioneering process will fill the steps in, show you where to go, give you some creative ideas, show you what to think of next, show you what to let go of, what's no longer serving you, cut your losses, and how to do that in an elegant way that doesn't burn you out.
Okay, beautiful. Love it. So it's tapping into our inner wisdom.
Yes. Yes.
Intuition.
Yes. So, and in anything you're wanting to create, whether it's an entrepreneurial goal, a business, a relationship, a health structure, a big project with a partner, whatever it is, each of those things has a geometry, an energetic code or structure that exists already in its completed form in the ether, in the field. It's already done. It's already complete. So as entrepreneurs, if we can get really clear about our target, our vision, which is why this is called visioneering, we're engineering the vision, visioneering. If we can get clear about the vision, then our consciousness, our intuitive and creative mind will help us fill in the gap. What's really, and this may fluff a few feathers, and I'm sorry if it does. It may or it may not. I'm not sure. But what I encourage an entrepreneur to consider is, there's a lot of things that get involved with the entrepreneurial thing. Is, am I of service? How am I going to change the world? How am I going to contribute in a meaningful way? And what I encourage folks to do is I encourage folks to put that second. What I encourage folks to do first is think about what you want first. What's important to you first. The biggest entrepreneurs, the biggest successes in the world, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, the guys who invented Apple. Steve Wozniak wanted a computer for himself. The thought of putting one in the world, in every house in the world, at first, wasn't even on the radar. Jessica Alba, who created the Honest Baby company, who's now worth $1 billion, she wanted care products for her babies, stuff that was important to her. And then it became an issue of service. For me in my career, it was, how do I get to express my art creatively, do what I love to do that fills me up and makes me super happy? And how do I do it in a way that's different, right? The entrepreneurial question, how do I do stuff that's different? And that was what drove me. That was my target. How do I do something for me first? And then once the momentum of that story is told, then you go, oh, I see how then this serves other people. Because if we put ourselves in the position of thinking what everybody else's targets are, well, I need to consider this person and this person and this person, what does everybody else need? If we do that, then our target gets very diffuse, right? We become like an archer with a bow and arrow. And I like to use the analogy of an archer a lot in this entrepreneurial story, that if we're not clear about what we want this thing to offer us first, then it's like shooting 16 arrows and you've only got a bag of 2, right? Mm-hmm. And so getting really clear about what your target is first, and then as the momentum of your vision starts to move, then what will start to happen, you'll start to notice, oh, I see how this can serve. I see how this can be of benefit. But it's literally putting the cart before the horse. If we put service to others first, and this is why I say it's counterintuitive to what we've been taught, that it's all about service first. It's all about service first. And then you go, we can't do it for ourselves because that's all rooted in ego. The entrepreneurial adventure is challenging. And so you're going to want to be really sure that your target is clear, because you're going to want the momentum, the thing that's going to push you or pull you, to be so strong that you've got enough momentum to move when the going gets tough. And my mouth to your ear, the going will get tough. So those are the things that I like to, as the visioneering process gets clear. So when I was an entrepreneur when I was 9, when I was an entrepreneur when I was in my 20s and developing my art career, and when I was developing this project with NASA, even developing the project with NASA, the reason, and this is a big international art show, the reason it came about was because I was doing it for me. I wanted to see a show like this, and I didn't see one. So I said, all right, well, I don't see one. I'll make one for me. I'll make one. And then once that started, then I saw how the service, how the influence, how the raising money and for awareness and, all that other stuff followed. So get really clear about the vision for yourself first, like an archer with the bow and arrow. And then everything else will start to move behind that vision. One of the analogies I use with the kids, the people that I coach, the clients that I coach, is I say it's really hard to steer unless you're moving, right? If you've ever driven a car, you can't steer the car unless it's moving. You can't steer a horse unless it's moving. You can't get an arrow into a target unless the arrow is moving. So you become the catalyst for that. What do I want? What do I want to see? What do I want to have? Who do I want to be? You use yourself first, and then service and stuff follows.
Yeah. Yeah, this is so, so important. And I would venture to say, to add a little bit to what you've said here, that we are each given this inner drive and this inner passion around something that we're meant to contribute.
Yeah.
But it very, very often starts out on a personal level. or
Yes.
that's how we perceive it at the beginning, is on a personal level. And that's why it's so important to tune into that, because
Yes.
yes, it is related to how we're meant to be in service, but it may not appear that way at the beginning. And yes, when we have this passion, we have this drive, we can't see it as ego.
Yes.
We can't see it as
Yes.
selfish. We have to listen to that.
Yes. Yeah. And that's, when we're talking mystically, when we're working with, our topic is generating your vision from the inside out. Everything happens within us first, right? Nothing that we create. Our business, our life, our health, our money is an expression of who we are. It comes out of us. It oozes out of us like sweaty goo. And so being able to embrace the idea, and this is actually part of the visioneering process. There's sort of 7 stages to the visioneering process, and the first one is inspiration. And there's 7 I's, like they all start with the I, and I just thought that was clever. The I and the I, visioneering eyes, so clever.
Love it.
So the first I of the visioneering process is inspiration. What inspires you? What are you moved to do? What are you moved to create? What are you moved to have? Here's the thing, even if your vision is driven by a desire to be wealthy, that's okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? The service, because listen, we're all good people. I don't think there's anybody in this conference who is thinking it's all about me and I just want to get rich and nobody else, who cares who else suffers.
Yeah.
Let's just agree that that's nobody on this call. But if your vision is to be a multimillionaire and finding the authentic, inspired way to do that, the service will come, right? If you're inspired to have a great relationship with your partner, a great relationship with the planet, or you want to turn it around, the stuff that follows that will come. So give yourself permission to let whatever vision you have, whatever inspiration you have, to be correct. And try to avoid getting into the thing of, is it spiritual enough? Is it altruistic enough? Am I coming from ego? That will take care of itself. We're all good people here. So let yourself off the hook and thinking you have to behave in a certain way in order for this to have meaning.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on that. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then we trip ourselves up thinking, well, is this idea noble enough? Is this idea spiritual enough? Is this idea going to help enough? And trust me, because we're all connected, because it's coming through you anyway, it will be of service just through the nature of you doing what is required to build it. Yeah.
Well, so going a little deeper into the spiritual aspects of this, the mystical aspects, how can we use our entrepreneurial goals to deepen into our mystical or spiritual gifts?
Well, so as we said at the beginning, an entrepreneur creates change and catalyzes change and tries to do things that are different. So in order for us to be able to do that, we have to become more of who we really are, right? And again, regardless of whether or not you're doing it in your own business or you're doing it in an existing place of employment or service, that if you're wanting to catalyze change, if you're wanting to catalyze growth, because as mystics, we understand that everything that we see out here is an expression of who we are being. If we set a goal and a target for our entrepreneurial goal, we say, okay, if I'm going to create that, I'm going to have to be somebody different. I'm going to have to be braver. I'm going to have to tap more into my intuition. I'm going to have to be willing to let old nonsense go. I'm going to have to be willing to cut my losses. I'm going to have to be able to think differently. And so to step into this entrepreneurial identity will force us to become something grander, something bigger, something braver. And it won't happen any other way, right? To create change, we have to be, you've heard the cliche, be the change you wish to see, blah, blah, blah. Heard it a million times, right? And that is no different than the entrepreneurial situation. you're going to have to become a more expanded, a more engaged, a more coherent, a more present, a more forgiving being in order to allow the space that that new vision to be birthed out of you.
Mm-hmm.
If you're continuing to stay the same and stay constricted and tightened, it can't come out. You'll be energetically constipated. So this process opens the flow. And that is a conscious choice you have to make.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, probably most people listening have experienced this in one form or another. You can't step out on this path of entrepreneurship in whatever form of it is right for you without going on a very, very deep personal growth
Yeah.
and usually spiritual journey, right?
Yes. Yes.
Very
And there's, anytime there's transformation, whether it's you moving from a job that you've done for 20 years into self-employment, or you're moving into a different position of power in the job that you're in, that change is, can be daunting. And it generates, the fact that the summit has got fearless in the title. That transitional change generates in the nervous system, it generates a turbulence, because the nervous system in our human nature responds to new stuff by generating anxiety, by generating that fear. And so as entrepreneurs, we have to recognize, okay, this is going to be new. It's going to freak me out, but I'm going to do it anyway. And sort of letting go of the fluffy notion that if your intuition or your mystical nature is guiding you towards making an entrepreneurial choice, that it's just going to feel like fairy dust and unicorns. Most times when it's something that's really going to ask you to grow, it's going to scare the bejeebers out of you. And that's when you recognize it and you say, I see you. It scares the shit out of me, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I'll bring the fear with me, because fear, when it's transmuted properly, helps us be aware, right? Yeah. We're not. It allows us to be discerning. So we want to be able to carry our fear with us as an ally, instead of having it, constrict and restrict us. And the process too, entrepreneurially, will happen in two ways. There will be times where it's the path of least resistance, where stuff just boom, boom, boom. It's like, oh, everything I touch turns to gold. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And my intuition led me here and it worked out fine. Path of least resistance, that's the first way. And the second one is the path of highest good. And that's your highest good, right? What calls you to courage or greater vision, or cultivating more power, more direction. And those two paths of least resistance and highest good, they intertwine. They intersect, and they're always active. So it's important to understand that when we make these choices and we say, I'm doing this thing, those are going to be the paths you're always on. Mm-hmm. So an entrepreneur will think, oh, it should always be the path of least resistance if I'm using my intuition. It's like, no, Your intuition will push you into situations that say, okay, highest good here, kid. Who are you? Who are you really? And then it's up to you to decide.
Yeah. Time to learn and grow a little bit here.
Or a lot.
Or a lot, yes.
Or a lot. When you're flat on your ass because you've just invested a bunch of money in something and it didn't work, you're like, oh God, I love the days. Where's the days when I was waiting tables? It's just so much easier. Oh. And then you brush yourself off and you say, okay, do you want to go back to the old life? And you go, no. All right, that stung, but I'll get up and do it again. Right?
Yes.
So
definitely. Yeah. Well, so more on the visioneering, right? And I know you said that this is rooted in reverse engineering the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you say that it's using the principles of being, doing, and having. So could you tell us a little bit more about those principles and how that works with?
Yes. So anytime we work mystically, whether it's an entrepreneurial goal, a health goal, we work with the target first, being, sorry, rephrase. The target is the having. What do I want to have? What do I want? What do I want to create? That's the have, that's the target. And most people will tend to work from that first. They'll go, what do I want to have? I want to have that. It's important to know the target. Absolutely. You need to know where you're sending your arrow. But when we're working mystically, understanding that everything is created from inwardly outward, where we start as an entrepreneur when we're working in the visioneering process is we work from being first. Being. To the point where you say, okay, if I already had that goal achieved, and I was that multimillionaire, globally respected spiritual teacher, who would I be? Who would I be in that position? Already there, already having it. And so you start to embody and train your being to be in that identity of it already. There's a mystical tenet that says, to he who has, more shall be given. And what that is a statement of consciousness. To he who possesses it in consciousness, it will be reflected in the outer world. So when we're working entrepreneurial, we work from the end goal as our being. I am a multimillionaire, globally respected spiritual teacher, blah, blah, whatever your goal is, or I am the CEO, or I am the lead office manager in my medical practice, whatever your target is, I am that now. That shapes being. And so you think to yourself, how does that person spend their time? How does that person carry their body? How does that person stand in line at the bank? How does that person talk to their spouse? How does that person brush their teeth? How does that person write a check? How does that person put a business proposal together? And you think about that. And then you notice how what you're doing now, is it in alignment with that? And you start to alter your being to come into more relationship. You integrate where you are now with where you want to be, and you start to take action in alignment with that being. So being first, doing. So are your actions in alignment with that identity? And then having. Then the stuff that you be, the stuff that you do will result in your having. Right? So a lot of people, they start with the having first. They're like, or they start with the doing first. I'm just going to go out and I'm going to work and work and work and work, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. But they haven't altered the being. So the doing is like spinning their wheels, or it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's what you're doing is you're moving chess boards or chess pieces on the board of reality. You're not altering the reality. So when we do visioneering work, we develop the target first, again, like the archer with your bow and arrow, and you aim at you know what your target is, and then you create the being around that. Who do I need to be? What are the thoughts that that person has? What are the attitudes that that person has? How does that person spend their time? And that becomes something we construct. And we become vigilant about that. And what that does then is it starts to close the gap in time. It collapses time. Because anytime you do something in consciousness first, it collapses timelines, right? So don't worry about the doing right off the bat. Get clear about the target and the being first, and then the rest will follow suit.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. I love that. And as we're stepping into being that role,
Mm-hmm.
that is our goal, to also be patient with ourselves, right? I think it's so important, especially at the beginning, because it takes time.
Yeah.
To make that shift. And in the long run, you're going to be collapsing time.
Yes.
But at the beginning, be good to yourself, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you catch yourself, and again, it's like I said before, momentum also collapses time. So people oftentimes will say, I'm just going to sit on my pillow and vibrate and attract it. No. It's the action that that starts to collapse things. And so when you're in the action and you find yourself slipping into old patterns or procrastination or overwhelm, or you know you need to make, you've been intuitively guided to make a choice, and you're like, yeah, but I don't want to reach out to that person. What if they reject me? You recognize those feelings that are coming up, the fear, the old patterns, and you recognize, you witness them, and you speak to them, or you speak them as you're sending an email out to a big potential client and you feel the anxiety coming up. If you can talk to yourself and say, I feel fear, before you send it, say, I'm really afraid right now. I'm really afraid that they might reject me. I'm really afraid that they might not answer me. I'm really afraid that I'm going to make a fool of myself. I'm really afraid that they might tell me to just go F myself and take a flying leap. And all of that energy then is freed from you. So that then when you do take the action, you're not carrying that baggage with you when you take the action. And so having that degree of patience and awareness and compassion, you know, say, I see you, I feel you, I hear you, I love you, but we're doing this anyway. Right. And that also helps you collapse those ideas of identity. Okay. And identity is also one of the I's. You know, that's the idea of being. Who am I being? What is the identity that I'm shaping here? And you get to decide, right? Yeah. The universe isn't holding some big secret, trump card going, oh, I've got your secret identity here and you've got to find it out. You get to decide, who do I want to be? If I want to be another Oprah Winfrey, I mean, nobody can be, you know what I'm saying? But if I want to create that as my identity, then by all means, if that's what inspires you, go for it. Right.
And what would you say if somebody is, wanting to create this identity, wanting to live into and begin to be this new identity, but they're not sure what it should be. Maybe they're not clear that they want to be a multi-million-dollar, spiritual teacher. I would think that archetypes might be useful.
Sure.
What do you recommend along those lines?
Yeah, well, an archetype is really, it allows us to, again, thinking of the idea of an archer, an archetype allows us to aim our bow and just let it go and say, okay, that gives me a target. It gives me something to aim for or aim at. Yeah. And so, a lot of people will say, well, I don't really know what I want to be. And I'll say, well, how do you want to feel? What do you want to do with your time? Do you want to be constricted to a 80-hour work week? Okay, if that thrills you, by all means, how can you exalt that vision? And so when people are sort of stuck about, I don't know what I want. And again, we've heard this before, is I'll always say, well, if you had all the free time in the world to do whatever it is you wanted to do, what would you do? And some people will say, I would love to spend time at my office and help my people be more organized. And for other people, they'd be like, that just does not sound like fun to me at all. And, I've got clients who are doctors who spend hours in the lab, and their joy is like figuring out how things work. So I invite you, when you don't know a thing, invite your curiosity to the game. And curiosity is the tool of a modern mystic, to be curious. All right, what would I like to do? How would I like to spend my time? How would I like to feel? Let's go look at that. Let's be curious. We can sniff it out. No, maybe that's not for me. And then you step back and you look again. We do not need to get it right the first time. It's always going to be changing, right? And you'll know if you're on the right path based on sort of how curious you are about, what can I do next here? How can I take the next step? It still might be scary. I'm not really sure. Is this for me? Is this mine? Let's go look. And then you go in. No, you can scrape it off your shoe and keep moving, right? So let go of the idea that if you get your purpose wrong, that you're going to burst into flames. I've never seen anybody burst into flames. And the reality of it is our purpose is always changing. Your purpose right now in this moment is a summit facilitator and a spiritual teacher. in a couple of hours when you're dealing with your children, your purpose is going to be mom. When you're dealing with your employees, your purpose is going to be a boss. Your purpose is always changing, like those paths. What is consistent is to ask yourself, if you're not sure about what you're going to do, ask yourself, who do I want to be? If you're not sure about what the doing is, then ask, who do I want to be? Okay, I don't know what I want to do as my purpose, but I want to be stronger. I want to be braver. I want to be wealthier. I want to be freer. I want to be happier. I want to be calmer. And that will start, again, that's momentum. That gets you moving. And then as you start to move in that way, then though, how do I do it and what do I do and how do I create that will fall in, right? So those are the questions that I always ask. Say, okay, how do I want to be in this world? I do want to be bigger. I do want to have more freedom. I do want to have more fun. All right. And then once you commit to that, then what do I want to do fits in later. And what do I want to have comes in after. So that's how I would answer that.
Okay.
That makes sense. Feels like it makes sense.
Makes total sense to me.
Okay.
Yeah. And the part you mentioned too about, allowing yourself to make mistakes, allowing yourself to fail, that is so important because, it's happened. I've failed many times,
Yes.
but I'm still here.
Yes.
Making it happen,
Yes.
So that is just so important. And we learn from every mistake. We learn so much,
Yes.
Mistakes are not really mistakes. I think they are life lessons that we really needed at that time.
Yeah. And it's going to be those mistakes that help you sort of feel your level of being there. It's like the image that always comes to mind when a mistake is made is in the movie The Matrix at the very beginning. And for those of you who've heard me talk before, I'm a Matrix geek, but there's a scene at the very beginning of the movie where the heroine, Trinity, is running away from the bad guys and she falls down the stairs and she's laying at the foot of the stairs and the bad guys are coming and there's no way out for her. And she says to herself, "Get up, Trinity, get up." And it's in that moment of falling where Will and Grace, not the TV show, where Will and Grace come together, right? When we fall down, we have to have the will to get up, to say, I'm not going to continue to lay here, even though it appears that this has been a massive disaster. And then when you have that will and you exercise the will, then the grace of spirit, the grace of divinity, the grace of your higher self comes in to support you. But without that perceived catastrophe that would force you to exercise your will, there's no room for the grace then to come in and lift you, right? Yeah. So that's why allowing yourself to make those mistakes is so important, because oftentimes that's where the window is the widest for intuitive support, mystical support, divine support, archetypical support to come along. Who do I want to be in this moment? A spiritual warrior or a wounded healer? I get to make a choice right now. All right. Which one is going to get me where I want to go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very important. Well, I have one more question for you, and it's around, how to access our intuition in a more targeted way, I guess, because I know that you say that there is tremendous power in a pointed question to help us in using our intuition. So could you share a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, anytime I'm training somebody in the visioneering process or the intuition process, as Jocelyn just said, the target is very important. You need to know where you want your mind to go. And if you don't know specifically what you want, the question becomes, who do I want to be? And allowing yourself to settle into that from the place of, okay, I want to be happy, healthy, stable, rich, whatever it is. And then you start to ask your intuition, all right, what's the wisest way for me to get there? Not necessarily what's the quickest or what's the easiest. What's the wisest? What's the most appropriate? And then you can ask your intuitive mind, show me the most excellent people who will bring me to that. You've got to give your intuitive mind something to go look for. A lot of folks in the spiritual practices will say, I'm just going to let the universe guide me. Well, that's inefficient because the universe is responding to who you're being. So if you're just going to say, I'm just going to let the universe decide, then the universe will give you the law of averages, the law of the collective, or what you've already been doing. So intuitively, you've got to ask a strong question. What is the wisest choice for me to make at this time? And to claim and intend, which is another I, that your choice is correct. My decision to do this, my decision to start a project with NASA, it's the right choice. Universe does not have an opinion. The universe is going to support me based on my choice. And to really commit to your identity, to really intend and say, I am creating this thing. I don't know how it's going to look or how it's going to show up, but I am doing this. And then your intuition comes in and starts to respond to that. But to ask your intuition questions, all right, show me the wisest choice. Show me the greatest potential. Show me the most excellent people. And then to also command your intuition to say, I am surrounded by the most excellent people. I am surrounded. And what your intuition will start to go is, oh, great, she's cut a potential for only excellence out of this field of limited potential where there are people over here who suck and there are people over here who are excellent. You've given your intuitive mind a target. And so your intuitive mind will say, here we go. And will start to bring you things that are excellent. So ask of your intuitive mind and command of your intuitive mind, and it will start to direct you.
Yeah. Okay.
Don't leave it up to the universe because there's too much stuff in the universe.
Yeah. Lots of options that you may or may
Lots of options. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Very powerful. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Definitely.
You know, and I'll give you a little example. When I was starting out in my art career, how this worked was I was a nobody. I was a woman in a career dominated by men. It was a wildlife art career. And I went to an art show where all of my heroes were, all of the people I had admired. And I walked through this show and I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to compete with these people? How am I going to compete? And that was the thing that it was crushing me. And I want you to notice the question. How am I going to compete? And that question flattened me. And in that moment, a new question came out and said, no, how am I going to be different? How am I going to be different? And 3 months later, the idea for my fine art ceramic showed up. And that's what took me into the stratosphere in my career. So it was a powerful question that your intuition responds to and then says, here, kid, you asked this question. How can you be different? Here it is. And then it's your choice then to recognize it when the intuition brings it to you and holds it in your face and says, what are you going to do? I'd never painted on a ceramic ever, but there it was. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really important. The energy behind the question.
Mm-hmm.
Create the energy.
Yes.
Behind
Yes.
what you're asking the universe. Yeah.
Yeah. And the equation energetically of visioneering is an equation. Energy plus information equals outcome. So in that moment where I was, how am I going to compete? Look at the energy of that. It's defeat. The information is competition. Do I want competition? No, I don't. But there's an equation being built there.
Yeah.
Versus, and that would have shaped an outcome if I'd stuck with it. Versus, no, how am I going to be different? Right? The energy is exalted. The energy is powerful. The energy is clear. The question is potent. And that generates a different outcome. Yeah. That's the visioneering in a nutshell. Energy plus information equals outcome. And how stable you are in that equation. right? So a lot of folks in the new age would be like, I'm vibrating high and I'm hanging out in the other realms. And they're like one of those air puppets in front of a used car salesman place. You know, they're all over the place,
Yes.
right?
My kids love those things.
They're awesome. They're lots of fun. They gather a lot of attention, but they're inefficient. They're inefficient directors or containers of energy. That's what high vibration in this does. Laser beam, very stable, very coherent. Again, the archer and the bow, right? If you're trying to aim a bow at a target and you're doing this, where's that bow going to go? Maybe into your neighbor's dog, right?
Yes.
So that equation of energy plus information is crucial to the visioneering process. And so be really aware of yourself, of how stable your conversation is energetically, who you are being in that moment. When you ask a question of your intuitive mind for guidance, if you're, I just can't, and you know, I'm exaggerating for effect, but there's greater power when you are, okay, no, show me the way, bring me the information, create excellence for me. It's far more stable.
Yeah. Yes. And we'll create something completely different from that energy.
Yes. And it still can be loving and kind and tender and compassionate. There's this misconception that thinks that if you're exercising will, that somehow your love and your tenderness and your kindness and your compassion goes out the window because you're holding a stable position. And it's actually the opposite. The more stable you are, the greater access you have to your spiritual resources. Then that love and kindness and compassion and generosity and care and service can then ooze out of you as a result of that. Right. But if you have no access to your spiritual resources because you're flinging around, then you can't be. It's harder. You get burned out more quickly. There's less you can give from that place of this.
Definitely.
So when I coach, I say, okay, imagine yourself as an archer. Imagine yourself as a laser beam, very stable and coherent, and this is your target, and that's who you are being. And then your vision, whether it's entrepreneurial or financial or health-wise or what you want to shape for the world, will come through you as an expression of this stable, rooted power.
Yeah.
And to own that as an aspect of your entrepreneurial nature, which is self-guided. Say, I'm self-guided. I make this choice for myself. I choose this for myself. And I trust that the universe will support me because I've made this choice so clearly and powerfully. And then all of the stuff will flow behind it like the wake of a boat.
Yeah, this is really important too, because I think we can, especially as women, especially as people wanting to make a big difference in the world in a positive way, right? We can get really stuck on this idea of if I, own my power, or if I choose to be big instead of playing small anymore, then we get that really confused with ego.
Yes.
And we get that confused with, we have some kind of conception of if I'm powerful or if I'm wealthy, then I can't be kind and generous and spiritual and all these things. And it is not true. It is so far the opposite of the truth, because we need to be fearless and confident and have the courage and stand in our power in order to carry out that mission.
Yes. Spiritual energy, when you expand into spiritual energy, you have to be a stable vessel for it to move, for it to channel through you, for lack of a better word. And in that, power in a mystical way is the ability to work with spiritual energy and shape it. That's power, right? Like a dam converts water into electricity. That's power, right? So we as entrepreneurs are taking spiritual energy, the invisible stuff, and converting it into matter. So matter and spirit are the same thing. Money is spirit. It's just a different degree of spirit. Influence then your reach is spirit. It's just a different degree of it. And so if you're not a noble enough container, and noble meaning strong and stable, if you're not a noble enough container for that much spirit to move through you to create wealth and health and success and entrepreneurial projects, then it's like trying to run a whitewater river through a garden hose, right? And that expanding into who am I being, that opens you up and it stabilizes you. So that, think of the idea of when a fire crew, firefighters, when they attach a fire hose to a fire hydrant and then they open the fire hydrant, there's nobody holding that hose, what happens? Right? Water goes everywhere. Nothing of any value occurs. But then what they do, they get these really hot 6 or 7 really sexy firefighters stabilizing that hose. All right? That's the vision I have. I've never met an ugly firefighter. Right? Stabilizing that hose and being able to aim it. That's power. Right? That's power. And so then that becomes you in your entrepreneurial nature. Where do I want to aim my hose? Right? And nobody is going to aim it for you. They're just not. You know, we can have all of these access to our spiritual allies and our unseen friends and our spiritual guides. They're not going to hold the hose for us. That's our job here in the 3D. It's our job in the material world. And so understanding that the money you want to create, the influence you want to have, the health you want to generate, whatever it is that you're wanting to shape, that is spirit in a more dense appearance. So your money is spiritual. That's another thing as entrepreneurs, we've got to tweak our idea about what wealth really is. And it's just a different degree of spirit. And Mother Teresa made over $150 million in her lifetime. She had a really powerful relationship with wealth. She gave it away, but she wouldn't have been able to do what she did in this world without a bucket load of money.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So altering our relationship with that conversation is also really important.
Yeah. Definitely.
You know, a mystic, a visionary is wealth. A mystic is power. A mystic is service. A mystic is grace. A mystic is creativity. Those are the identity traits of somebody who is coming from that mystical place. And so it just, again, it becomes an expression of who they are because it's rooted in their being. So you decide your entrepreneurial goal is an aspect of your spiritual nature. Right? It's not separate from it. It can't be. And so you think of the inspired vision that you have, even if it's just a little whisper, the first I is inspiration. You say, I see you. And then you intend, you say, I see you and I say yes to you. That's my intention. Yes. I've caught a whisper of you. I intend. Yes. And then you shape identity. Who do I need to be to say yes to this? And so you'll see how they start to track each other, right? Inspiration, intention, identity. And then once those 3 are nailed down, then you get intuition, imagination, innovation, integration, where you put all of those things together. And then the last one is implementation, the last one. How do I put this to work in the 3D world so stuff happens?
Yeah.
Right? That's when you develop your strategies and your platforms and your web pages and who do you talk to. Those are your material strategies. But the other ones before, those are all non-physical. So you gather it all, you stir up your recipe like a cake, and then you pop it in the oven and boof. Right?
Big things happen.
Yeah, yeah. But it's important to have those 8 eyes. Because be aware of them in the process.
See how they flow into each other too.
Yeah.
You need the first one before you can get to.
Yeah. Yes. Right. So that again is an aspect of being, then doing, then having. Notice in that equation, implementation, the doing was last. right? It wasn't, have a great idea and then go do it. No, there was these things that you need to shape in your visioneering process first, so that when you do take action, it's rooted in what you're wanting to shape. And then when you take action, be willing to screw it up and be willing for it not to look pretty or perfect the first time. When I first stepped out on the art scene with my ceramics, I had purple zebras, I had green giraffes, because the ceramic process is very different than painting on canvas. Stuff blew up in the kiln all the time. I would work 6 weeks on a piece and it would blow up or it would melt. Oh my God. But once I figured it out, right, then that's when, again, once the momentum was generated and I stayed committed, then that's how I became, the best-selling artist of my kind in the world. And the same thing is happening with the NASA project, right? You just build the momentum slowly but surely. And then once the trajectory starts to happen, then that's when you bring in your partnerships, and that's when you bring in your sponsors, and that's when you bring in your location, and that's when you bring in the people who will help you. But at first, it's slow. So, I followed the same steps of inspiration, intention, identity, imagination, innovation, intuition, integration, and implementation in the NASA thing. I said, okay, am I going to walk my talk here? Yeah, I'm going to. And, 2020, come to Pasadena.
Yeah, I cannot wait. Cannot wait to see the
Yeah.
result.
Yes. So whatever you're working towards in your entrepreneurial goal, what do I want to change? How do I want to be different in my own life, in my business, and what I offer to the world? And then get strong about those choices, and then follow those trajectory of those 8 eyes, and it will start to show up for you. And then your job is to show up for it. Right? It becomes this relationship between you and your vision. Am I brave enough to say yes? And the inspiration shows up. Woo. It wasn't until months after I decided to do the show with NASA, I said, what have I gotten myself into? Oh my gosh. But in that moment, you have to be brave enough to say yes when that inspiration hits.
Yeah, that's the fearless part.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And mildly insane. And really, that's what Steve Jobs said. He said, it's the visionaries, it's the entrepreneurs who are insane. Mm-hmm. They are batshit crazy, but they are the ones who are going to make a difference. Yes. Just look at any of the big entrepreneurs out there. They're all a little mad. And it makes no sense to the people who look at them, who watch them. And it's hard to be in relationship with a mystic. It's hard to be in relationship with a spiritual entrepreneur. It's very challenging for people who don't get it. So have patience and compassion for the people around you, because it's difficult for them to get it. And there's no amount of explaining that you can do that will help them understand it, because they're just not wired that way. Yeah. So it's hard. Unless you're married to an entrepreneur or you're partnered with an entrepreneur who is the same sort of batshit crazy as you are, then it might be challenging. So cut your friends and family some slack. Understand that they're simply not wired the way you are, and be prepared to lose friends along the way, to lose old patterns along the way, to lose things that are familiar along the way.
Yeah,
because it's a turbulent place to be. Yeah. And not everybody's cut out for it.
Yeah. And that's part of the growth process too, is getting really clear on who you are and who do you want to have in your world, and who understands, who gets it.
Yes. Yes. And that's an aspect of excellence.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. That's an aspect of excellence. I noticed that when part of my morning ritual became, I'm surrounded by excellence in everything. I'm surrounded by excellent health, excellent wealth, excellent happiness, excellent partners, excellent neighbors, that old paradigms started to fall away and new ones started to show up, because the degree of excellence that would be required to pull off a show of this size with NASA has to be high, right? And that excellence more than ever runs through me, right? What is my level of excellence? Am I, as much as I love Grace and Frankie, am I going to binge watch Netflix this weekend? Well, maybe I will, because, you know, downtime is good too. But am I really using my time in the most excellent way? And is my structure of time excellent? Do I make sure I've got am I creating excellent containers for self-care, an excellent container for what needs to be done for NASA, an excellent container for what needs to be done for my spiritual coaching practice? Are these things excellent? And you'll be able to ask yourself and go, well, I could shape that up a little more, right? And those things become non-negotiable, those degrees of excellence. And you'll notice in that equation, I came first. My self-care always comes first, right? Yourself first, then your service. So I have to be sure that in the morning I schedule an excellent bundle of time that's just for me and my dog and my tea and my meditation and my qigong. And then after 11 o'clock, the world can have me. And then after 5 o'clock, then it's just me again. That's a paradigm of excellence. And you get to decide how that looks. But it's really important to be sure that you're at the first of that. You're first in line. Because then you're useless to anybody if you're empty, right? You've heard it said. And so if you can shape excellence, you make a choice. Excellence. I don't know what excellence is going to look like, but boom, 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 boom. It will start to reveal itself to you, and you'll notice it as it shows up. That's one of my favorite ones, because that's pretty precise and pretty specific as it relates to a quality of a thing, a quality, but you don't necessarily know what it's going to be, but you recognize the quality of the person or the quality of the relationship or the quality of the client when they show up. You go, oh, that's the excellence I requested. Here we go.
Yeah, that's a beautiful practice. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, this has been
so much.
so wonderful. Yeah, so much to talk about. I know we could go on for probably 2 more hours here.
Yes.
This has been so wonderful, Simone, as always. It's wonderful to talk with you, and to hear all of these paradigm shifting, ways of looking at the world and looking at what we want to create and approaching and taking action. So yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I know that you have some really fantastic free gifts for our audience, including a spiritual wealth mini masterclass and other things. So would you like to share a little bit about those?
Sure. I'm throwing the kitchen sink at you guys. So we talked about in the entrepreneurial adventure that having a good relationship with wealth is really important, and being able to heal that relationship, to transmute it, and so that you and your money and your entrepreneurial adventure are all working together. So the free gift is my spiritual wealth mini masterclass that I taught to my modern mystics, and it also has with it an accompanying guided meditation. So it just helps you sort of restructure your perception of wealth and understand that money is spirit, just in a different form.
Beautiful.
So that is the first gift. The second gift is $145 off of an individual clarity session with me. It's a 2-hour clarity session where we can dive into what you're working on entrepreneurially, or if you've got other stuff you're working on. That's also a special offer. And then I'm teaching a visioneering online workshop starting in March, where we will pull this process apart and be able to apply what you're working on. And so there's a special early bird offer available for the listeners as well. I think that's it. That's it. That's not it. That's a lot. But
it's a lot. Yes, very generous. Thank you so much.
You're
yeah.
welcome.
So, and for everybody who would like to claim one or more of those gifts, just click on the link that's right below the interview here, and it will take you to Simone's page where she has listed those, and you can see all of the beautiful offerings in all their detail.
Yes.
Yeah, and I know that you are also offering a bonus gift for those who purchase unlimited lifetime access to all of the interviews, which is the 7 attributes of intuitive entrepreneurs. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, this bonus gift is just a really simple little article, and it sort of outlines the attributes of an intuitive business leader, um, and how they, it's things like Richard Branson and Oprah and Steve Jobs and myself and others. They have these sort of character traits that identify them. They shape their identity as intuitive business leaders. So it's a really short and sweet um, sort of little checklist, and you can go, okay, am I doing this? Am I doing this? Can I develop this more? Okay. So it just helps you sort of track the personality traits and the energetic attributes of people who use their intuition a lot in entrepreneurial work.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you for offering that as well. Yeah,
You're
and
welcome.
so there will be a link below for anyone who would like to upgrade to the unlimited lifetime access and receive that bonus from Simone, as well as bonuses from other amazing speakers as well. That link is right below the interview as well. So just scroll down to see those beautiful options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Lots to consider.
yeah, yes. Lots of goodness.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Simone, for all that you've shared here, as I said, and it's just always a pleasure to talk with you. So thank you for being a part of Fearless Female Entrepreneurs.
You're welcome. My pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah,
And
have a fantastic
keep
day.
everybody posted on your success as these things kick together. That's the fun part.
Yeah, yes, definitely. All right, thank
Thanks,
you.
Jocelyn.